take ownership. It's not just ownership generally, it's take ownership. You need to act like an owner. You need to honor your commitments. You need to own up to your failures. You need to act with integrity. So those are just some examples of how we took this idea of values, core values, and found a way to apply it, to make it actionable.
Welcome to the Better People Podcast. Our guest today is William Roche, CEO of Clyde Weaver. Welcome, William. Thanks for joining us today.
All right, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So, William, before we jump into our discussion today, I'd love to ask you to just share a little bit about yourself with our listeners.
Sure. Well, I am the CEO of Clyde Weaver. It's a 104-year-old business today. It was started in 1920. It is a fourth generation business, and I am the first non-family CEO to step into the role. I did so in November 2019. So as I was really just getting my feet into understanding, firm ground and understand what the business does and who we are, the world changed. And so we changed our business and had a lot of success since. And I'm here to kind of share that story a little bit.
Awesome. Well, I am so excited that you're here. And there is so much that we can talk about. I really do want to focus on one thing in this conversation, and that's the work that you've been doing around values. But before we get there, I just have to ask, first non-family member CEO in a business that's been around for 104 years. You're working with some of the fourth generation members. How's it going? What's that been like for you?
It's been very interesting. Initially, a big challenge. We have a long tradition. We have many people that have worked with the company for a long time. We have multiple generation family members working together. Fathers spent their whole career. Their son steps in at some point and works there their whole career. I mean, we currently have mother, son, grandson working for us. We have a 50-year club. We have multiple people that have worked for the company for 50 years. Our longest right now is 65 years she's been working with our company.
Wow.
So stepping into the business as an outsider into the lead role was quite challenging when I am, and particularly, as I said, at the onset of COVID and in a business that was in a position that needed a turnaround. It was very challenging to try to gain the trust of individuals and help them see that we needed to change the business that they've always known, and some of the processes and way that we do things.
What would you say was one thing you did that helped you earn that trust?
Over the years, there's obviously just been more of the exposure and experience of working with, but something that we've consistently tried to focus on is communication, open communication, more communication. One of the big things that I did was in my second year, we opened the books to the entire company. So we had we started yearly strategy meetings where as we kind of came up with short-term yearly strategic goals and actions, we would bring in people from all over the company in small groups, and we would talk to them about where we were going, how we performed last year, and the financial performance of the business. And I think that was quite eye-opening when everybody realized that we weren't just taking wheelbarrows of money to the bank. And that really helped people understand the why behind me coming on board. It helped them understand the why of the change that I was driving.
That makes sense. People need to understand why it is they're being asked to change or to live through change. So awesome. Okay, so let's get into the topic of values, because this was also something, as you and I discussed the other day, that when you came on board, you realized you were with this company over 100 years, and there wasn't this clear kind of idea of what we were doing. this clear, I guess, vision. So what did you notice? Like, what was the first thing that I said to you, hey, we got to address this?
So we do a yearly employee engagement survey, and that's been going on since our HR manager had stepped into the role about
Mm.
3 to 5 years before I came. And so that first year, I saw the results of the survey, and one of the first questions is about leadership, and it talks, the category of leadership, and the first one of the first questions is, does the senior leadership live up to the cultural values of the company? And we got dinged pretty hard on it. Apparently, we always had. But I sat there and said, well, what are the cultural values of the company? And we've been around for over 100 years, or at that time, it was just over 100 years. And we don't have defined values. We don't have a set of core values that everybody can recite. We don't have anything that um, we can all come together to say, this is what we expect our senior leaders to live up to. There was also nothing for me to say, this is the expectations that we have for our staff and how they act and behave. And that that really got to me. I said, it's kind of been Clyde himself back in 1920 started going to market and selling ham and cheese, and we've been doing that and building it, and we've got 150 staff, and it's been 100 years, and everybody knows how to go to market and sell meat and cheese. But we never sat down and did kind of what should be one of the first steps of defining, who are we, who do we want, who do we want to be on a personal characteristic basis. What kind of behaviors do we expect to see from our staff and from ourselves?
If you don't define them, they get created on their own, right? It just might not be what you want.
Absolutely. I mean, that was part of the problem is we had people who've been doing this. Well, I've been doing this for 50 years. I've been doing it longer than you've been alive. I know better, and I know what it should be, and I know who Clyde Weaver, what Clyde Weaver is as a company. I know what we represent, and that's not it. It's like, well, can you tell me what it is? Like, no, but whatever you're changing, I don't like it. So yeah, we started with, let's define core values, and we picked a pretty interesting method of doing it. We kind of split into two groups. Our HR manager created a committee with five employees from across different functions of the organization. And they got together and said, all right, let's define core values. Who are we? What do we represent? And I also want to take the perspective of what do we want our core values to be? Not necessarily just identifying what is, but if we want them to be ideal core values of who we want to represent, what should that include? On the same time, I met with the owners, the three owners, third and fourth generation, and I said the same thing. If we're going to define what values we want, what do they look like? And what was very interesting is as we progressed, the committee met a number of times. They defined it. I met with the ownership to define it. We all came together, not everybody, but the HR manager and I came together, and we started to identify there's really clear alignment between what the owners want the core values to be, what the employees believe the core values should be. And, apart from some kind of wording, um, you know, it all came together, and we were all on the same page, and we came up with a list of five core values that defined who everybody envisioned us to be.
So on, because I know so many of our listeners are in the same boat. Either they have values that aren't necessarily working for them any longer, or maybe just, they've been forgotten about, or they're in that place where they say, hey, we really need to look at this for our organization. How long did that process take?
It was not a quick process. Now, we didn't say, let's all get together and spend 2 days off site to go through this. It was more of like once a week, we're going to get that committee together and talk through this. So we took it slowly, and it took a number of months to really kind of get everything into a single defined place. And another reason is that as we did this, I talked with the HR manager, and I said, we don't want to just come up with words that get put on a wall somewhere and then are never thought of again. I want our core values to be actionable. I want verbs associated with it. So, for instance, you know, one of our big things everybody told me when I started, like, we're great with customer service. I said, okay. And it was very clear that service was going to be one of those core values, but what about it? Well, I don't want just service, because service is so ambiguous. No, what service means something different to every individual. So we said, what does it mean for us to provide service to our customers? So we came up with a list of um, 5 actionable kind of key slogans that define what embodied service means. And it's not just service, it's embodied service. There's got to be a verb associated with it. And how do you embody service? We want to define that, not make it so ambiguous. So we say, we want you to be a fanatic about response time. We don't want customers waiting around for us. And again, we're a retail business, so it's very important that we're face to face with customers. There's no like leave a message and we'll get back to you. So we've got to be fanatic about response time. We've got to leave a great impression. That was another one that we chose there. Another one, ownership, take ownership. It's not just ownership generally; it's take ownership. You need to act like an owner. You need to honor your commitments. You need to own up to your failures. You need to act with integrity. So those are just some examples of how we took this idea of values, core values, and found a way to apply it or to make it actionable. And then the application of it is kind of the next step that we focused on, which was
Yeah.
taking it from, again, words on a wall to actions to now let's get our staff acting this way. So I can talk about that.
Before I ask you to dig into that a little bit, let me just go back again to the process. So you said you took it slow, you met over a couple months, you had regular meetings, you had 2 different groups working on it that came together. And then I think I'm assuming, because I know if I were you in this situation, the fact that when the 2 different groups worked on something that ended up being basically the same thing, that had to give you a lot of confidence in those values that you came up with, knowing that 2 different groups came up with the same thing. Am I correct?
Absolutely. And the thing is that we looked at it from different perspectives. It wasn't
Mhm.
just the ownership top down. This is what our values are.
Mhm.
And at the same time, it wasn't bottom up. Hey, employees, what do you want our values to like? What is the
Uh,
culture that you want and believe in? And instead, when we were able to bring the two perspectives together, it was very reassuring that this is who we are and who we want to be.
So my follow-up question is, do you think the fact that you did draw it out, that you spent some time in between the meetings and really, I guess, allowed it to percolate, do you think that gave you a better result than if you had carved out 2 days to just like, let's go put ourselves in a room and figure this out?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
I think that when it comes to something, this is whatever the business book that you're going to read is, or from Jim Collins and Good is Great to EOS model of operations. There's always a focus on defining your core values. Um, it's not something that should be taken lightly. Something that you should invest time into, because if you rush through it and you don't have the intentionality of creating something that's going to be long lasting and really represent who you are, then you have the chance of having wasted a good deal of time and resources up front.
Yeah. So I love that you took that step of saying, here are the words, here's what they mean, here's what they look like in action. So to create those action statements, did you do that again in the separate groups, or was that just you and the HR person? Like, how did you do that?
Uh, we actually, when once we got the 5 values determined, I allowed the staff to really work on what does that mean. I
Okay.
wanted them to define it, particularly because they're the ones kind of, they're the front line. They're the ones working with their coworkers. They're the ones that are face to face with customers. And I gave them kind of some broad guidelines, like let's come up with five, and let's review them. And I helped tweak some of the language here and there. But generally, it was the core values committee that was led by staff.
So that's not the end of the story. So you created the values, you identified the words, you added the action verbs to it, and so that it's pretty clear what these mean in action. And then what did you do next?
Well, what we've done since, and we kind of launched this about a year and a half ago at one of the big strategy meetings. We laid out this is how we're going to define our values, and we did paint them on the wall. They're on the wall of our break room. They are on the wall of one of our hallways in the headquarters, our corporate headquarters. But they're more than that. They're more than words on the wall. Yes, they're there as a visual reminder. We made kind of posters that went out to all of our retail locations as a visual reminder. We wanted our staff not to just hear it once and okay, whatever. We wanted people to see it and remember it. But we also wanted to incorporate it, formalize it, codify it as, again, who are we? How do we act? How do we interact? How do we behave with each other and with our customers? So we completely changed our yearly performance review to be based around our core values rather than be operationally focused. Does this person show up on time? Are they meeting the dress code? Are they, can they work independently? Those are things that, in my mind, you don't address in a yearly performance review. You address them as you have whatever transgression it is. Somebody didn't show up on time. You don't say, well, their review is next month, so I'll connect with them then. You say, hey, you were late today. You can't have that. The the yearly review is more about how is your behavior over the last year really aligned or misaligned with our core values and who we want to be. And again, that was easier to do because we have a set of five definitions for each of the five core values. So it's really based around 25 kind of aspects of how are you doing in honoring your commitments? Do we have examples of you not living up to your word? How are you on being a fanatic with response time? Do you leave a great impression?
It makes it a lot easier to manage performance when you have the statements, when people know what they're being measured against, and when your leaders know what they're measuring against. Makes it so much easier. So I know you're using it with regards to hiring also. What does that look like for you?
Absolutely. I think one of the most important things that you can do is hire the right people
Mm-hmm.
and avoid hiring the wrong people.
As much
I
as
mean,
possible.
that might be the most important thing is avoid hiring the wrong people.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so much more work and energy if you hire the wrong
Yeah.
person. But if you do happen to do so, having a set of core values as a framework to course correct
Mm-hmm.
makes it so much easier than saying like, I don't know if we hired the right person. On the other hand, if ahead of time you go into an interview with somebody, you can identify that they're kind of matching and meeting all of these kind of core values or most of them. Um, you can feel good about making the hire to fit, even if they don't have the best skill set. You can hire for fit and train to skill. Uh, we during our interviews, we talk about our core values. On day one, as a person is onboarding, they go through training with all the different functions that they're going to be overseeing. But first start is with our HR manager. They're given a pamphlet with all of our core values, the list of the five actions. We talk about how important they are to us as a company. Um, Somewhere in the early part of the morning, they come in and sit down with me and I give them a little bit of history of the organization, history of myself, and then a rundown of our mission statement and our core values. And again, a lot of people might look at this and think, well, values are fluff. It's that thing that we did when we started the company, or it's that 2-day retreat, and it's the words on the wall. But I think you need to apply this, and you need to apply it often. And you need to build that framework and that benchmark for how are your staff going to behave. Because if you don't, as you said earlier, staff will create their own way of behaving. They'll create their own culture.
The words on the wall. They will do it their own way if it's not being reinforced. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow. So, just out of curiosity, with regards to interviewing, have you created specific interview questions that measure value or that help you identify if they share the same values?
Um, I don't believe so. So that's a little bit outside of my scope.
Mhm.
Apart from higher level hires, I'm not involved in the interview process, and
Okay.
we have very little turnover. I've only been involved with one higher level interview last
Okay.
couple of years, and since we've done this, at which point did ask you a number of questions orderly.
Mhm.
However, the majority of hiring that we do is at the kind of the retail clerk level, the frontline employee. I know that our HR manager, as she's going through the interviews, is taking into consideration this core values framework as she's the one who really helped create it.
So, what difference has this made for you? You rolled it out about 2 years ago, correct?
Yes, yes.
And you did it right. You created you had the groups identify the values, you put the action words together, the 5 statements for each value, so everyone is clear on what it means to live these values. You're measuring against them, you're managing performance against them. How has this helped things at S. Clyde Weaver?
Um, so there's a very easy quantitative way to answer
Mm.
that question, which is that our engagement survey has better scores. Right? There's a lot more people that are having a better experience working with us, and there's a lot fewer people that are having a negative experience working with us. And I mean it's been dramatic, particularly in that leadership and cultural categories. Um, the not so quantitative answer is that it feels different. It feels better. There's less negativity. There's less question of change. Right? Again, I came in. We had a lot of change to go through. The world was changing around us. Things were going to be different in the future. You know, we were a 100-year-old business that was doing some things the way they did 100 years ago. We needed to modernize. We needed to change, and there was a lot of resistance to that. However, with more time, with more communication, with a definition of values, with reminding people of our mission statement, our values consistently, there's far less of the resistance. There's much more acceptance of like, oh, this is a great change. Oh, this is helping us move forward. Right. There's much less of the, well, this isn't escalating.
So now let me just share, because I don't think you called it out specifically. One of your values is innovation. So, and I know when we were speaking, you thought the fact that you had a value that speaks to innovation, and I don't know what the statements were that you created to describe how we live innovation, but I'm sure that's helped your employees then accept the change that you're trying to roll out, knowing that it's a value.
Absolutely. When we were going through the process, so our 5 values are deliver quality, embody service, foster teamwork. Those first 3 are kind of the who we have always been. That was what the staff really connected to. This is what we are. We bring quality. We're service oriented, and we're great teams. And I said, but who do we want our staff to be? How do we want? And particularly having gone through COVID, have gone through so much change. We brought on embrace innovation. We needed to welcome change, which is one of those actions. We wanted to work on continuous improvement. We knew that relying on doing things the way that we've done for 100 years wasn't going to work in today's world. The last core value that we have was take ownership. I had mentioned
Mhm.
earlier that a couple of those actions were honor commitments, act with integrity, and own consequences of your actions. So with taking ownership, that was another one of where we wanted our staff to be, who we wanted them to be. They weren't necessarily there yet. The embrace change or embrace innovation wasn't necessarily there yet. So those 2 were kind of who we. That's the ideal situation. That's who we want to be. The other 3 were definitely who we are, and so we had kind of a connection between how things have always been and who we already believe we are, and then also, but let's push it a little further of what do we need to be continue to be relevant and successful in the future.
So I realize this is maybe that crystal ball question, right? Because how would you know for sure? But I'm just curious. You shared at the beginning of this podcast that you had been meeting resistance, right? You're the new guy coming into an organization that's been around over 100 years. You've got people that have been there, one person 65 years, right? So there's a lot of people there with a lot of history, used to doing things the way they've been doing them. And you now have this group that's open to change. If you didn't create the value of embrace innovation and talk about how important that is, do you think you'd be having the same success with this group accepting the change you're trying to roll out?
It's a hard question to answer. What I think is definitely a known is that it wouldn't have been as easy for us to accept some of the pushback or those that left the organization because they just couldn't agree. It wouldn't have been as easy for us as a management team, as a leadership team to say that's okay. Right. We had some turnover over the years with change. And you're going to have that with any organization. There's going to be those that just don't want to participate. You've chosen to go different directions. The thing is, once you define the direction you're going, you define who you are, you define those values. If you've got somebody that says, well, I don't agree with it, then the entire team can be accepting of that and say, okay, that's fine. It doesn't mean you're a bad person, but it means that we have to part ways here, and we can all be okay with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, and what I'm loving about this conversation is just one, it's so important to do, right? To really figure out what are your values. And two, well, it is so important to do, and it's so important that you really put thought into it. And I love that you took the approach of who are we now and who do we want to be? Right? What represents who we are and what's really important that is maybe always a part of who we are, but also let's think about who it is we need to become or where we want to go and create values that address that as well. And the impact that those values can really have. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
I mean,
no, go ahead. Go ahead. Fine. Now I'm going to ask. So what's next? You've got these values. You've got things moving in the right direction. What's next for you, for S. Clyde Weaver?
Well, the focus on values, the changes that we've implemented, the codifying it, the working, formalizing it in some of our processes, that all started last year. At this point, it's pretty well integrated in how we operate. So now that allows us to focus on continuing to improve how we not how we act internally, but how do we act with customers? How do we act externally? How do we interact and focus on providing great service and quality? And so in this last strategy meeting, we revealed the Weaver way to great customer experience. We created 5 action items for our staff to follow as they look at how they work through a sales process with customers that is not transactional but experiential. It's more than just I'd like a pound of bacon, which we have Pennsylvania's best bacon, or I'd like this block of Canadian cheddar cheese, which we just won a gold medal at the World Cheese Awards. So like we sell really great product, but I want it to be more than just product. I want it to be more than just transactional. I don't want it to be, I'd like a piece of cheese that's, $5. Thank you. I want it to be, oh, have you tried our cheese? What are you using the cheese for? Have can I suggest pairing this cheese with this meat or jelly or jam or something? But it's now we've moved because we've got core values incorporated and we're applying it. We can now focus on the things that help improve how we act and interact with customers and not just with ourselves.
So now I'm hungry, first of all. talking about bacon and cheese. I was waiting for you to mention shoe fly pie because I did see that on your website as well. Possibly one of my favorite things ever. And nobody knows what it is. Not many
It is
people.
it is a central Pennsylvania PA Dutch specialty. Sand tarts and shoe fly pie and sweet bologna. These are things that I had never heard of until I started working within the
All
region.
right. Oh, wow. Yeah. So, yeah, definitely a favorite. Had it since childhood. So, I'm glad I found a way to get shoe fly pie into this podcast. So this has been a great conversation, William. I asked you about what's next. So let me leave you with this question because you've had a, a really great career and you've had a lot of leadership roles. And I know when you and I talked, right, your leadership began back when you were playing rugby in high school and college. So always been a part of your life. Is there, I guess, what's been your greatest leadership lesson?
Wow. There's always
Or,
more to learn.
yeah.
There's always more
Oh,
to learn. And I would just go back to kind of what I said at the beginning about communication. It is so important to communicate, to build trust, to frequently be seen and be connected with those that you're working with. Um, yeah, I mean, without trust, nobody's going to want to do anything for you. And the way you do that is being open, being there, connecting, and communicating well.
well, that's awesome. I love that, right? You're never done learning. So that's awesome. Well, William, thank you so much for being here with us today, for really sharing your journey around values. I think it's so important. And I love that you did it, you did it the right way, and you're seeing benefits from it. So I think there's so much there that our listeners can take from today's conversation. So thank you again for joining us and for sharing this. And I know you're in your busy season right now, so especially thank you for taking some time out during this season to talk with us. And good luck and happy holidays.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I love being able to talk about this stuff, share my experience, and hopefully there's others out there that can take something that I've learned and apply it to their own situation and grow their business and their leadership.
I believe that will be the case. So thank you.